All right, we should be live. Welcome back, everybody. Guys, Scientology is in absolute free fall. Can Tom Cruise save Scientology? The answer is no, and we're here to talk about it. First of all, I want to show you a couple photographs that inspired me to do this video, because I'm going to show you the photographs, and then these photographs, this evidence, this proof is going to serve as a jumping off point for a larger discussion about the rock solid evidence that Scientology is in an absolute state of free fall. And not only can Tom Cruise not save Scientology, it's my opinion that Tom Cruise is even partially responsible for helping accelerate the free fall of Scientology, but you know, that could be up for some debate. Okay, these are actual photographs from an event this past Saturday on L. Ron Hubbard Way in Hollywood. This is an event for which Scientology pulled permits to shut down the entire street. This is something I just posted to my community tab on my YouTube channel. It says, Los Angeles has more Scientologists than any other city. This was the attendance at their permitted street closure event on L. Ron Hubbard Way in Hollywood on Saturday afternoon. Scientology is in free fall. Guys, this was their own event on their street in downtown Hollywood, in the middle of a city and a county that they claim has and does in fact have more Scientologists than any other city or county on planet Earth. What you're looking at here is a Way to Happiness booth. Way to Happiness is a little Scientology booklet. And here's another shot showing the entire street from a better angle. Guys, there's literally no one there. Now, even if non-Scientologists, even if regular people in the real world would stay far, far away from a Scientology event just due to Scientology's horrible reputation, the least that you would expect is that Scientology's own public members would show up for an event that Scientology went through the trouble of taking a permit to close down the entire street. And even if their own public members couldn't be bothered to take time out of their day on a beautiful Saturday afternoon to go down and support an event being held by their cult, you would think that the cult would at least send their own Sea Org members who have nothing better to do in the day. The Sea Org members who are holed up in those buildings, working 18 hours a day, 7 days a week for slave wages. You would think that even just for appearance's sake, David Miscavige would be like, hey guys, you know, we took out a permit to close down the street for these events, and it sure would look bad if nobody was at these events. Could you at least send, I don't know, half the crew out at a time to just wander? Hell, 10% of the crew. Just send 10% of the crew out at a time, take shifts, you know, just wander around, act like you're supposed to be there, you know, something. Now, someone could say, Aaron, this isn't even fair. It's not a real event. They pulled a permit just to prevent the protesters from doing their thing. But here's the thing. Whereas it's true that the motivation for Scientology to pull permits for the events to close down L. Ron Hubbard Way, whereas it is true that the motivation for this was to prevent the protesters from being able to protest on L. Ron Hubbard Way. Yes, that was the motivation. The truth is, once Scientology goes through the trouble of actually putting on these events, they do try to get people to come. Like, that is a fact. They do want people there. The fact that they can't even get anyone to show up makes them look really, 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 really bad. So now, do they want a bunch of non-Scientologists there? No, not really, which is why they would put out the call to the Scientology public. Hey, even if they were to be honest about it and be like, hey guys, we're kind of putting on a BS event. You guys know the score. You guys know we don't really care about this, but we got to put on a show. There's going to be some cameras there. You know, people might be flying their drones over. We don't want to show that our own street for our own event is absolutely and completely vacant. And that's why, even though we know it's a BS event, even though we know their heart and soul isn't into it, the truth remains, guys. Scientology is an absolute free fall. Guys, Scientology says that there's over 10,000, forget Los Angeles for a moment. Let's talk about Clearwater, Florida. Clearwater, Florida, where the entire population of Clearwater, Florida is only 120 thousand people. And yet, even in Clearwater, Scientology will lie to the press and say there are over 10,000 Scientologists living in Clearwater, Florida. And that's just tiny Clearwater, Florida. In LA, I've never heard them put a number on how many Scientologists that they claim live in LA County. But we're going to break down some numbers here. Here's some numbers that they do put out. Even back as far back as the 90s, they were claiming the existence of as many as 10 million Scientologists. Now, this is where we start to have a little bit of fun. Okay, let's look at what that would imply as far as members per organization if there were, in fact, 10 million Scientologists. So there's about 150 Scientology organizations in the world. Let's just say half of them are in the United States. These are rough numbers. 75 organizations. So if there were 5 million Scientologists in the world and about 150 orgs, and if half of them were in the US, so 5 million Scientologists in the US, about 75 orgs in the US, that would be 65,000 Scientologists per org. Most orgs couldn't put together 65 Scientologists to come to an event. Those are the numbers that David Miscavige and some of his spokespeople were claiming back in the 90s. David Miscavige has actually claimed that Scientology has experienced exponential growth since then. David Miscavige has claimed that Scientology has experienced exponential growth even since the COVID lockdowns, remarkably. Okay, so numbers as hard as these can be hard to wrap your mind around and truly visualize. So let's break it down. Let's lower the number. Let's say there were only 3 million Scientologists in the world. Half of them were in the United States. That would still imply 20,000 Scientologists per org. You guys, per org. Now, anyone who's ever been in Scientology for even 5 minutes knows there's not even 200 Scientologists per org. Okay, let's lower the number a little bit. Let's lower the number to only 10% of what Scientology was claiming 35 years ago. Let's say there was 1 million Scientologists in the world, half of them in the United States. That would still be almost 7,000 Scientologists per org. Any of the protesters who have visited any of these orgs outside of Los Angeles, you can tell there's not even 100 Scientologists per org. Maybe in the brand new buildings where they've cannibalized staff members from all over the country and all over the world, and they've brought in staff members to man up the org, and maybe it looks like there's more than 70 Scientologists. But those are only at the newest, biggest, brightest, shiniest orgs that are being artificially propped up for the time being. I dare you to go to New Haven. I dare you to go to Boston. I dare you to go to, God, what's an org that no one's been to recently? Oh my God, go to Albuquerque. Oh my God, go to Albuquerque and try to find 7 Scientologists at the org. Okay, so what does Tom Cruise have to do with this? I can tell you that back in 2004, was it, when David Miscavige awarded Tom Cruise the IAS Freedom Medal of Valor and said that Tom Cruise was responsible for introducing over 1 billion people to Scientology. And this was back when Tom Cruise was still legitimately the biggest movie star on earth. I can tell you that as a good little Scientology Sea Org member, and I'll speak for the others that were there with me, truly believe that Tom Cruise was supposed to be the one to help Scientology get worldwide acceptance, to legitimize Scientology, to really put it into the mainstream, to make it popular, to make it hip, to make it cool to be a Scientologist. That was 20 years ago. Okay, now there is a principle that L. Ron Hubbard introduced into Scientology management. And this principle is almost single-handedly responsible for the witch hunt culture that exists in Scientology. And the principle is that Scientology is so effective, so workable, so popular, that you don't actually have to work to get stats up. You actually have to work very hard to keep them down. And he says stats do not just go down and they do not just stay down. Somebody has to be actively pushing them down and keeping them down. This is actually a pretty insidious management philosophy if you think about it for a few minutes, because it excuses any and all reasons why Scientology would not be expanding, as it excuses any and all reasons that apply to all of Scientology why it would not be expanding and it would not be and why it would be failing. It also excuses ineptitude and malfeasance from senior management, because all senior management has to do is point to the people who are working in the lower orgs, point to the people who are actually doing the hard work of Scientology, pointing to the people who are working their guts out for nothing, trying to expand Scientology. All he has to do is point to them and say, which one of you evil suppressive persons are actively suppressing Scientology by keeping and pushing and forcing the stats to be down? It's pretty insidious. Now, because I know that policy exists and I know that mindset exists, is why I feel it is so important for Scientologists all around the world to understand it is not just your org that is empty and failing. It is all orgs worldwide. It is not possible that the reason all orgs worldwide are empty and failing is because in each one of those individual orgs, some evil suppressive person who's on the bankroll of big psychiatry and big pharma is actively trying to sabotage Scientology and weld the doors shut. L. Ron Hubbard literally said that in order to prevent orgs from expanding, you would practically have to chain the doors shut and weld them shut to prevent anyone from going into an org, because the natural state of a Scientology org is expansion and flourishing and prospering. And so that is why I ask, how do you Scientologists in the world explain not only the lack of expansion, but the actual contraction? And I want to take the opportunity to point out that the fact that David Miscavige knows stats have been contracting for as long as they have is actually one of the main reasons that he started the real estate strategy, the ideal org strategy. He cannot get new members into Scientology. He knows recruitment isn't working. The internet marketing and PR isn't working. The sidewalk recruitment is not working. But his power, his ability to continue to retain power depends on creating the impression amongst Scientologists in the world that Scientology is actually expanding. How do you create the impression that Scientology is expanding in the face of a rapidly dwindling membership? You change the definition of expansion. Instead of more members, more auditors made, whatever, you change it to a real estate definition. And you create this apparency that if we buy a new building that's 10 times bigger than the previous building, then it sort of implies we're expanding by 10x. Grant Cardone approves this message. You got to 10x your game, bro. You just got to 10x it. You got to get your money right. Well, Grant Cardone and David Miscavige have something in common. They like to pretend that they're a lot bigger and a lot richer than they really are. So David Miscavige and Scientology have these billions of dollars in the bank that they've made from sucking every dollar and cent out of every Scientologist, every dollar and cent they possibly could out of every Scientologist for the last 20, 30, 40 years. And he basically decided that what he's going to focus on is dollars and real estate. And that's basically what he's done. And to the Scientologists out there who've been caught up in this and are kind of blinded by the smoke and the mirrors of the whole thing, I want to point out to you that you guys all know who've ever had anything to do with an ideal org opening, there's never enough staff to meet the staff complement to open these buildings. If you just think about the numbers for a moment, that is actually all the evidence you need to show there's no demand for these buildings. The normal process, like if an org was busy and expanding, it would be absolutely packed out. They wouldn't be able to fit people into the course rooms. They wouldn't be able to fit all the auditors into the auditing rooms. The organizations would be making tons of money, and they would use that money to buy a new building, and the new building would be appropriately sized, and there would be no problem staffing the building. But that's not what happens when you open an ideal org, is it? It's not what happens. First of all, it takes 20 years to raise the damn money. Well, it took 2 or 3 years to raise the money to buy the building. Then it takes 20 years to raise the money to renovate the building. Then when the building gets renovated, you're not allowed to open the building because there's no staff. If the strategy started 20 years ago, then how come 20 years later, there is still not enough staff for the building that was purchased 20 years ago? And so I got to tell you, everything that we're talking about right here, for me, in my mind, is epitomized by this empty street, you guys. This empty street. This is L. Ron Hubbard Way. This is Scientology's largest base in Los Angeles. They can't even get 10 people to show up to their street for an event they closed the damn street for. So let's go back to the numbers. If there was 1 million Scientologists in the world, and if half of them were in the United States, there would be 7,000 Scientologists per org. Guys, there's 3 orgs on that street. That's over 20. There would be over 20,000 Scientology public. Just on that street alone, they can't get, never mind 20,000, they can't get 20 to show up. And by the way, in the history of the Galactic Federation, Scientology's never been able to get 20,000 people to show up for a David Miscavige event, an L. Ron Hubbard event, because guys, there's barely 20,000 Scientologists in the entire world. And, the question comes up a lot. Is there anything, any message that can be delivered, any little piece of information, comments, questions, whatever, that can help break through the cult mindset of Scientologists? Whether if you're a protester outside these orgs, is there anything that would have any impact? And to a certain extent, the way the cult mind control works, there's not a whole lot you could say that would be really effective, but it's interesting to come up with things that might be effective. Trying to get Scientologists to understand that it is not just their org that is empty, vacant, failing, non-viable, understaffed. It's every org in the world. That just might be one of those things. Maybe, maybe not. You never really know. It just might be one of those things that gets a staff member thinking, because when you're in Scientology and you're on staff, it is very, very easy to swallow the PR line and to believe that you are the reason that your stats are down, that the org stats are down, that the org is empty. Very easy to believe that. If they go, if every org in the world is struggling the same way that we are struggling here, then maybe it's actually not the staff's fault. Maybe there's actually something structurally wrong with the entire organization. And that can only be attributed to the leadership at the top. That can only be attributed to David Miscavige. If Scientologists start to suspect that the problems they see around them, the problems they encounter on post, the difficulties that the org experiences, if they start to suspect that all of that is actually attributable to David Miscavige, it's a bridge too far to think that they would find it attributable to L. Ron Hubbard. But if they start to believe that it is attributable to David Miscavige himself, and there's something wrong with him or how he's running the organization or the priorities of the organization or what the organization has its focus on now, that actually will be, in many cases, the first step they take on their route out of Scientology. Because it is not possible to think that David Miscavige is responsible for the problems that Scientology encounters. It is not possible to think that and to also continue to be a Scientologist for very long. So anyway, I know I made an awful lot out of 2 pictures from L. Ron Hubbard Way, but I truly see all of these dots connecting in this way. This picture of a completely vacant L. Ron Hubbard Way is a little bit of a microcosm of the macrocosm problem that Scientology is experiencing. And I'm here for it all day. Scientology couldn't possibly fail fast enough. It's failing under its own weight. We're just here to help speed up the process. All right, guys, that's it on this one. Eat more pizza now. Thank you for gifting 5 channel memberships. You are Amazing. Kimmy Steele, will you be doing any more commentary on the fall of Aaron Cairo and Braille? I did see a video this morning about Braille skateboarding shutting down its whole warehouse. I don't really know enough about that whole thing to know how to immediately jump in and do a video about it. And I have already done a video about it. I'm going to study up on it and see if I can figure out a new angle on that. And if I can figure out a new angle, then I will do a video. All right, guys, thank you so much for hanging out with me. Stay tuned for much more, and I'll talk to you guys later.
Okay, if you want to see my rock and roll songs, click right on this guitar. And if you want to see a different one of my videos, then you could click right inside here. If you have subscribed or not, subscribe right here. Bye.